When it comes to exploring the unknown parts of the world, the first thing which comes to mind is often the so-called Age of Discovery, which occurred in the 15th to the 17th centuries. However, long before this era, many intrepid adventurers were pushing the bounds of the known world with epic journeys that should not be overlooked. Today, let us join one such expedition of Greeks led by Pytheas of Massalia, which traveled all the way to the subarctic and beyond. Here, they would discover wonders beyond wonders.
You can continue the tradition of exploration through our sponsor, Star Trek Fleet Command. It's a 4X mobile strategy game where you have the con to explore the entire Star Trek universe. Choose a faction, customize your ship, staff your crew, and set off on your own path to discover mysteries or engage in real-time combat across an open world. Story arcs help provide context to your journey while enriching the world with famous characters like Kirk, Spock, and Data from all your favorite franchises. Right now, Strange New Worlds is arriving in Star Trek Fleet Command, which features Captain Pike and his fellow officers of the USS Enterprise, as well as a new arc which allows players to follow the show's story in-game through weekly episodic missions. The addition of the holodeck building now also allows players the chance to explore past missions and arcs from across the entire Star Trek Fleet Command universe. The game is always evolving with new abilities, buffs, enemy types, and much more as you adventure out into deep space. Star Trek Fleet Command is available for free on iOS and Android, so download it now using my link below and join the fight. Enjoy! In antiquity, the distant lands of the north were poorly understood. Much of what was known from beyond the Mediterranean came through trade and merchants, which were exchanged between distant regions. Valuable goods such as tin, for instance, made their way from the British Isles down the Atlantic coast through a series of intermediaries before eventually being dumped into the Mediterranean ecosystem. In response, many people began working their way upstream of these maritime trade networks to gain an economic advantage. In this way, did groups such as the Greeks and the Phoenicians spread their tendrils across the western Mediterranean. Explorers came first, followed by merchants, trade posts, and eventually colonies. Famously, Himilco of Carthage launched one such expedition beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which may have reached as far as Britannia. Thanks to this and other journeys, tantalizing rumors were being spread about what lay to the distant north. Herodotus, ever the purveyor of such stories, leaves us with some ideas of what lay in this terra incognita. For instance, he reports that there existed the mysterious island of the Cassatarides from which tin originated. He speaks further of various mythical peoples of the north, such as the Hyperboreans, whom others describe living idyllic lives in the land of the midnight sun. With regards to geography, Diodorus Siculus preserves the following account from Herodotus of Abdera. Quote, "In the regions beyond the land of the Celts, there lies in the ocean an island no smaller than Sicily. This island, the account continues, is situated in the north, and is inhabited by the Hyperboreans, who are called by that name because their home is beyond the point whence the north wind Boreas blows. And the island is both fertile and productive of every crop, and has an unusually temperate climate." Clearly, in the ancient imagination, this was a land worth exploring. Now, let us join one such man and his crew who dared to make that journey. Our story today will focus on the 4th century BC expedition of Pytheas of Massalia. He hailed from a Greek colony which had been established near the southern mouth of the Rhine around 600 BC. Shortly after its founding, it had quickly grown as a commercial center with many lucrative trade routes and soon its own local colonies along the southern coast of Gaul and Iberia. Unfortunately, we know very little about Pytheas' backstory, and though he reportedly wrote an account of his journey called On the Oceans, no versions survive, and we're instead left with the quotes and summaries of his work made by ancient historians such as Strabo, Pliny, and Diodorus. From them, we're able to discern that he was a geographer and astronomer born around 350 BC. Likely, he would have had substantial experience with naval navigation and was widely traveled prior to the northern expedition. Strabo, citing Polybius, claims that Pytheas was a poor, private individual who was unlikely to have made the journey on his own. This has led some to speculate that the merchants or government of Massalia may have actually sponsored the expedition and placed him in command. Unfortunately, we can't be certain as to the origins of the mission. Neither about what ship or crew was involved. For such a long journey, however, it is likely that something akin to a Holcus-style Greek cargo ship was used. Such vessels were sturdy, round-hulled, and meant for extended travel.
it would have been crewed by little more than a dozen men, who could have used the large cargo hold to store much needed provisions for the journey ahead. Other theories speculate that Pytheas may have traveled intermittently on foot with the help of Celtic Courage-style boats for water crossings when needed. We will be assuming that the journey was made primarily by sea using a Greek ship, which was launched from somewhere around Massalia. When it did set sail, likely around 330 BC, the ship and its crew would have gone west along the coast of Iberia towards the Pillars of Hercules. This side of the Mediterranean was controlled by the Carthaginians, who reportedly policed access to the Atlantic. To get through, Pytheas may have had to seek permission from the Phoenicians, or simply snuck through along the shore at night. Once beyond this checkpoint, he would have begun the long journey north. As with Himilco before him, there would have been plentiful opportunities to stop along the way and have dealings with the various trade posts which studded this merchant route. Yet the further north they went, the more foreign the lands became. At some point, any translators brought along would have begun to lose their effectiveness as they lost contact with the known world. Eventually, the expedition reached the northern fringes of Gaul, arriving at modern Brittany. From there, Pytheas reportedly made the crossing to a spot called Beleriand. It was around this area that he began to make all manner of reports dealing with astronomy, geography, biology, oceanography, and ethnology. Unfortunately, only a few fragments remain. Perhaps the most consequential is the idea that Pytheas was the first to name the area Britannia, which came from the Celtic word Britanni, which meant something along the lines of the painted people or the tattooed folk. The name would eventually morph due to the P versus B Celtic language tradition and become Britannia. If this etymology is true, then Pytheas must have gotten quite a close look at the inhabitants of this mysterious land. Indeed, Diodorus Siculus quotes Pytheas extensively in his description of the Britons by noting the following. The island of Britain is thickly populated. The people are ruled by many kings and aristocrats. They live in houses of reeds or timber. They are of simple manners and are content with plain fare. Their way of harvesting their grain is to cut off only the heads and store them in roofed buildings, and each day they select the ripened heads and grind them for sustenance. And finally, there is an island called Myctus, lying 6 days' sail inwards from Britannia, where tin is to be found. The Britons crossed to the island in wicker boats, sewn over with hides. It is unclear how long the expedition tarried in these southern regions. Eventually, however, they were compelled to sail on, likely swinging around western Britannia and proceeding north along the coast of modern Wales. It is in this sea that they presumably made many more observations. For instance, he took measurements of the tides, reporting that they rose 80 cubits, a far larger number than anything found in the Mediterranean. Based on some interpretations of this account, Pytheas may have also been among the first to associate the tides to the phases of the moon. In addition, he also supposedly took a number of latitudinal readings, presumably using a gnomon or a similar instrument. These were devices to take measurements of the sun's shadow from different latitudes, and thereby calculate one's position. In this way, he would have been able to navigate and take notes on the itinerary of his journey. It is from these that later historians would attempt to calculate the true size of Britannia. Next, Pytheas sailed onwards along the western coast of Caledonia or modern Scotland. Passing between the Hebrides, he then reported the existence of the Orcades Islands. Presumably, these were the Orkneys. Somewhere around this time, it was boasted that he traveled the whole of Britannia accessible by foot. What exactly is meant by this is unclear, and ancient authors such as Strabo ridicule the feat as being absurd. And yet, the next phase of the journey would prove even more incredible. Pytheas now reports that he sailed beyond the island for 6 days, eventually encountering a landmass he called Thule. Where exactly this was has bedeviled scholars ever since. Based on what was reported, there was only an approximate latitude given, with no longitude to tell us whether the expedition sailed west or east. Fierce debate has therefore surrounded the location of Pytheas' Thule. Candidates include Shetland, the Faroe Islands, Iceland, and Norway. It's difficult to know for sure, so I figured it would be best to simply relay the passages as they are written. A statement by Geminus of Rhodes quotes On the Ocean by saying the following: "The barbarians showed us the place where the sun goes to rest, for it was the case that in these parts the nights were very short, in some places 2, in others 3 hours long, so that the sun rose again a short time after it had set." This observation is in keeping with the later writings of Pliny, who states, quote, "Last of all those mentioned is Thule, where, as I have said, there are no nights during the solstice when the sun is passing through the sign of Cancer, and also no days during the winter solstice. Some believe this is true for 6 continuous months." Should we accept that Pytheas actually made such observations in person, then his expedition would have indeed made it extremely far to the north. This is seemingly confirmed when he goes on to describe the unique habits of the people of this land. For instance, Strabo says of Pytheas, quote, "He might possibly seem to have made adequate use of the facts as regards to the people who live close to the frozen zone, when he says that the people live on millet and other herbs, and on fruits and roots, and where there are grain and honey, the people get their beverage also from them. As for the grain, he says, they have no pure sunshine. They poured it out in large storehouses, after first gathering in the ears thither, for the threshing floors become useless because of the lack of sunshine and because of the rains." As if all this wasn't enough, the stunning extent of the expedition is further displayed by what is reported next. Pytheas claims that a day's journey north of Thule brought one to the Congealed Sea. It is here that, quote, "Neither earth, water, nor air exists separately, but a sort of concretion of all of these, resembling a sea lung in which the earth, the sea, and all things were suspended, thus forming, as it were, a link to unite the whole together." What exactly was witnessed is open to interpretation. However, the common understanding is that he had encountered what is referred to as pancake ice, which is a phenomena where wave action shapes slush ice into a series of rounded objects that float at the surface. The reference by Pytheas of this looking like a sea lung makes more sense when we understand that the term was also used to describe a species of Mediterranean jellyfish. The experience of a Greek crew in such alien conditions must have been unimaginable as they sat shivering in the cold while surrounded by the wonders to be found at the ends of the earth. Yet they could not remain here forever. Soon, the expedition began its long journey home. Once more, their exact route is unknown. Pytheas claimed to have visited the whole of the north during his time abroad, and may have circled around northeastern Europe as part of his return. Here is a tantalizing clue recorded by Pliny the Elder in his book The Natural History. Quote, "Pytheas said that the Gutones, a people of Germany, inhabited the shores of an estuary of the ocean called Mentonomon, their territory extending a distance of 6,000 stadia. That at one day's sail from this territory is the Isle of Abalus, upon the shores of which amber is thrown up by the waves in spring, it being an excretion of the sea, in a concrete form, as also that the inhabitants use the amber by way of fuel, and sell it to their neighbors the Teutones." Based on this account, some believe that Pytheas made it as far as the Baltic, passing the island of Heligoland and turning back upon reaching the mouth of the river Vistula, which was said to be the furthest extent of Germania, before the vast stretches of Scythia and the Great Unknown. Some speculate that in doing so he was seeking to circumnavigate the continent. Even if only some of this is true, it would have made for an impressive addition to his already incredible periplus. Finally, the Greeks would return home to Massalia. At last, they now settled down for some well-deserved rest and relaxation. It is during this period that Pytheas would likely have begun to compile all his notes and thoughts into his famous work on the oceans. Soon after its publication, likely around 320 BC, it would captivate many audiences and see widespread distribution across the Mediterranean world. On the Oceans would be read, copied, and debated by many, and was likely a prized treasure of the Library of Alexandria. After all, it would stand as the most detailed account of what lay to the far north for almost 3 centuries until the Roman conquests. Looking back on this story, it's incredible to think just how much was accomplished by a tiny crew in a rickety boat, sailing bravely into the unknown with each rising of the sun. Anyways, I hope you found this video both entertaining and enlightening. A big thanks to the patrons for sponsoring the video, and to the researchers, writers, and artists for making this episode possible. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content, and check out these other related episodes. See you in the next one.